The next panel, with the title How Media Law and EU Regulations Impact the Media Market, will be moderated by Rodrigo Ballester, head of the Center for European Studies at MCC.
Jó napot kívánok mindenki! Good morning. Thank you for being here. It's going to be EU related today. It's going to be a bit technical, but that's only the surface because some of the questions we're going to discuss today, if you scratch a bit, are really existential to the future, not only of the publishers' business and newspapers, but also of the democratic debate. The EU is now one layer of the media regulation in the European Union. And the EU is getting more and more traction, more and more competences in that field. And the question that is really underlying all the others that we're going to raise today is basically whether the EU is bringing an added value in preserving this democratic ecosystem and this pluralism, or if it's actually doing the contrary. Of course, technical questions also call for very nuanced opinion. Sometimes open questions do not get answers. But again, those are really existential ones that somehow need to be addressed. Addressed by the very, very expert and distinguished panelists we have. On my right, Miklós Szánthó, who is the director of Alapjogokért, the Center for Fundamental Rights, a leading conservative think tank in Hungary and beyond. Let me also welcome Mr. Dr. Jorge Soley, who is a general contributor in El Debate and also somebody from the publishing group that is behind El Debate, which is a Spanish online, pretty new and very, very successful newspaper, which is the Asociación Católica de Propagandistas, ACDP. And so, again, from a publisher's point of view, we'll be also very, very happy to get your views. Mr. Florian Nehm, who is the head of EU affairs at Axel Springer, one, if not the largest editor in Europe. Let me also welcome Mr. Koltay András, Koltay, who is the president of the National Media and Info Communications Authority here in Hungary, so from the regulation side. And finally, somebody that was already on stage before, Mr. George Chirita, who, I say it again, but is the director of the Romanian Association of Audiovisual Communications. Gentlemen, you are all very familiar with what the EU is doing. Let's start maybe with the question of the copyright directive. This directive has been adopted in 2019, and by now it should well be implemented. The raison d'être, the main reason of this directive was, among other things, but basically to protect also the creators. Creators were artists, but also journalists. And again, what's the underlying question? The question really underpinning the debate is whether, publishers can still, if we are protecting their business model enough so that they can be independent, and basically whether the pluralism, media pluralism, media freedom is going to finally be outsourced, subcontracted to big tech platforms like Google, maybe in 20 years' time a Chinese one, and so on and so forth. And this is where the threat to democracy could come from. Mr. Nehm, what is your stance on that? Do you think that this EU legislation, so this copyright directive from 2019, basically paved the way in the right direction? Do you think that we are doing enough? Do you think they should do more? What is your stance on that, please?
Thank you. Florian Nehm, for transparency to say, I work for Axel Springer, but I am as well supporting the Rinie groups, since the two companies are good friends, and Switzerland is not a member, so we help, and Tibor Kovacs is my Hungarian boss in this sense regarding EU affairs. The copyright directive is a fantastic initiative by the European Commission that was the first in the world. The first law came in Germany, weak law. The best law was in Spain, Artículo 32.2, best in the world, unfortunately not working. What is the idea behind is that publishers usually got their money at the kiosk, selling copies that could not be reproduced. You cannot Xerox or copy commercial values. In the digital world, yes, you can. Brand, news, and distribute. You can copy this 1,000,000 times, and this value of a branded content is not protected, was not protected, partly because the publishers were too sleepy and lacked the fantasy. Result, paper sales go down, less money for publishers to hire journalists and double check and do controls. Digital go up, not protected. So very slowly, the European institutions now pass this directive. The directive is weak, but it exists. It was the first one. After that, Australia got a new idea, much better, different, not based on copyright, but on negotiation, and is implemented. You might remember this, January 2020, Facebook unfriended Australia. They cut them off. And now a few days later, they put it on, and Mr. Zuckerberg showed his own feet, and this now raised the interest of India, Canada, Brazil, US, etc. So this is now a world activity, but Europe was first, and now it is the national implementations. Since it's a directive, this needs to be implemented in the 27 provinces of Europe. The first one was France, then came a number of, Hungary has passed it as well, but there's still some lacking, like Poland. But the law is not enough. You then need the publishers to create a collective management organization. This might sound technical, but the same thing you have for music, to et cetera, et cetera. The publishers are not used to this. They need to build it, register it. The best one is in Denmark. They represent 97%, including state television. They all have websites that have branded news that is aggregated. The worst is Germany. The CMO there represents only 35% because the publishers have other interests or prefer to do direct deals with mega platforms. So you see a big divergence. In Hungary, they're still awaiting registration. Now, when registration is there, the next step will be starting negotiation. But here you have Wales on one side and Sardinia, so on the other side. You can see how this disparity of bargaining power, that is the central problem, and this is why some countries in Europe, Italy, Denmark, Czech Republic, have introduced something the others have not in Hungary. That is an arbitration mechanism. We will see how it works. It has not started yet. So you see it is a long run, very important to bring autonomous economic viability to a diversity of offerings in journalism. That is the story. We are still in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe, Mr. Koltay, from a regulator point of view, how did you welcome this copyright directive? And also another question is like, some of the solutions that Mr. Nehm already put on the table, for example, this CMO, this Common Management Organization, or this arbitration mechanism, do you think that will benefit the implementation of this directive? Do you think that you will be able to better protect the ecosystem like that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation to this panel. When the directive was adopted in 2019, I saw it as a step forward in terms of platform and media regulation and the regulation of the relationship between these tech giants and traditional media publishers. Unfortunately, our authority has not the powers to deal with copyright issues. There's up to a separate body to oversee the Hungarian media market in this regard. So we follow the development just as a supporter, because we are, obviously, as a media authority, we are very much interested in having a healthy and diverse media market in Hungary, which does not lack the necessary funds and doing well economically. I agree with Florian in this regard that the form of an EU directive allows member states to adopt additional rules that can give more details as a directive can. So I think Hungary should and the Hungarian government should think about also the next steps. But still, I think the directive made an important step in the right direction, as well as the Digital Services Act adopted last year, also strengthening the individual freedom, meaning the individual freedom of media outlets as well. There's a certain section in the European Media Freedom Act, we will discuss about this later, which also aims to strengthen media outlets against major online platforms. I'm not sure that these will be enough, because obviously there's a huge problem that these technological giants, through their very professional advertising systems, basically get a very disproportionate share of the advertising budget on the national level, and this won't change by the directive or the DSA in themselves. So we'll see what will happen.
Thank you very much. Yes, you pointed out one of the, if not the biggest problem, which is basically the cannibalization, the free riding of big techs on the work done by publishers and journalists through advertisement. Jorge, Mr. Soley, from, now you have the point of view of an outlet that has been created very, very recently, 1.5 years ago, not even. It is very, very successful, but basically that is only online. Do you see that those big techs are the main threat to your, not only to your business model, but basically to your freedom of expression as a media online outlet? How do you see also this copyright issue?
Well, I don't see them as our biggest threat. I think that, as you have said, in Spain, we have a law that it's working not so bad, and on the other side, we have been talking about the problem with ad revenues, and I think that this is key for understanding at least the Spanish situation. When I think in the first panel, Javier Bellamor said that when you go, when some politician is talking to the press, nobody makes the questions that everybody has in their minds, because it's something that you can. And I think that why is this happening? Because nowadays a big share of the Spanish media are living on subsidies from the state. They have seen how the advertisement revenues have been down, and they live on subsidies, so they lose independence. They don't want to annoy the politicians on whom their survival depends. Our model is a different kind of model. As you have said, the ACDP, Asociación Catholic Association of Propagandists, who is the owner of El Debate, is a Catholic association with more than a century of life, and devoted to taking the Catholic point of view to the public square. We think that this point of view enriches the public debate. So naturally, we are in the education business. We have schools, we have 4 universities in Spain, and also the natural move has been to be also in the media world. So, of course, we want El Debate to be sustainable, but we have our own sources. So that gives us the independence the media that depend on subsidies don't have. But so answering your question, for us, it's not the biggest threat is not the big tech, but the control from the government. They cannot control us through subsidies, but they can try to cancel us through other means.
It's not any better as a threat.
Not at all.
Maybe even worse. Mr. Chirita, and for you, what is the biggest threat? Now that we have a new one on the table, are you more afraid of big tech and this absolutely unbalanced relationship of power, or another unbalanced relationship of power, which is basically between public subsidies and those who get them and those who don't?
So I presume that all the situation is quite different regarding broadcasters. For instance, there is for 15 years already a draft treaty at the World Copyright Organization to grant rights for broadcasters, which is not even today finally drafted and adopted. So the problem we face now is that there is a switch from linear television and linear broadcasting to broadcasting on internet, and the audiovisual content is also one of the main activity domain for internet. And there is, as it was already mentioned here, the news that come from the European Parliament, which wants to make some regulation which will limit the power of the very large online platforms and will impede them to intervene on the programs and to limit access to the the public by the audiovisual content, no matter where it's coming from. At the same time, about the new directives which was implemented in Romania already last year in March, we had some interventions in the drafting of the draft law which transposed the directive, correcting some local errors which were made by the Romanian government, which, the Ministry of Culture, which had legal initiative at that time. And now we are involved in transposing the law in relationship with collective management organizations by starting negotiations with them. We already went to court in some respect where there was no perspective to fulfill with the conclusion those kind of negotiations. And this is the overall environment we are dealing with. But just going back in the past, we had step-by-step serious successes in defending the copyright problems and let's say what was wrong in understanding the legislation on different aspects, and we hope this will also happen in the future.
I see. Thank you very much, and Mr. Szánthó Miklós, from the freedom of expression point of view, what do you think is the best solution, and what are the biggest threats? I mean, one of the things that we can perceive clearly is that most of the media planet is left leaning, and sometimes it's difficult also for the conservative voices, just to ensure pluralism. When sometimes the situation is unbalanced, who is best placed, to bring, this extra touch of pluralism that is absolutely needed in every society?
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for the invitation as well. I do not have the crystal ball, and I do not have the right solution, but I know that what is the greater threat on freedom of expression. And the greater threat nowadays on
on freedom of expression and freedom of conscience is cancel culture. It's vogue. This insanity of this neo-Marxist progressivism, which tries to not only to put a pressure on some politically, maybe on some politically motivated arguments, but this idea, and this idea is shared by the European elites, this idea tries to cancel all kind of political argumentation and political approaches in the media as well, when it comes to, let's say, conservative approaches or conservative argumentation. My biggest problem nowadays, and this is true for most part of the different media regulations coming from Brussels, is the very fact that liberals, progressives, they do invent some formally neutral or objective mechanisms, like they, from a historical point of view, they were the promoters of democracy for the first time of history, of course, classical liberalism, and they promoted equal suffrage, equal and general suffrage. Now it turns out that when conservative forces are able to use the media or democratic mechanisms to gain power, then democracy is labeled as populism. And they are trying to limit the voice of the people, the sovereign state, etc. Now we do see the very same tendency here. What was the original saying about the internet? I don't know, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, that it will bring total democracy. It will bring freedom of information. Everyone on the planet will be able to speak out loud because there will be no burdens like the big press or printed press or editors who may check the content. Internet will be free for everyone. And of course, that was the saying as well for Web 2.0 and for the social media as well, that social media will bring total democracy to all. Will give you access to free information. You will have the possibility to get the information what you want, and you will be able to communicate freely on the internet and on social media. And now it turned out that no, social media did not bring total democracy. And if they see that, for example, in some parts of the world, not exclusively progressive or liberal forces are able to use, let's say in general, the internet, or maybe conservative forces are able to be very visible on social media platforms, then they are trying to restrict that type of communication. So I do not have the solution, sorry, but my original problem, and this is true for this Media Freedom Act as well, which is now proposed by the Commission, that originally it's neutral. Formally, it's about level playing field and it's about independent journalism, etc. But I do have the feeling that at the end of the day, it will turn out that it serves political interest.
Maybe political interests that are suddenly confused, deliberately confused with objectivity, which is indeed one of the dangers. But Jorge, you wanted to quickly react?
Very briefly, I think that a big problem with these directives that when you read it, they look formally correct, but it's the concepts they are built upon. I think that we have seen it regarding, for example, hate speech, and now we are going to see it regarding disinformation, for instance, that very loosey concepts, not clearly defined, and that they tend to expand they keep expanding, and as they are not strictly defined, I think that here is the problem, the big threat.
Sorry, just one last example. The Media Freedom Act speaks about combating disinformation, fake news. But what is the biggest fake news of our times? The biggest fake news of our times is political correctness. But I'm sure that decision makers in Brussels do not want to cancel political correctness, as political correctness is their fundamental value.
Or psychology, maybe. But it's true that, you know, another example of very blurry concept that can be interpreted in many ways, but that's another debate, but is, for example, European values, but that's another debate. But precisely, both of you already put on the table the second, I would say, even more controversial, definitely more controversial topic for our panel, which is the Media Freedom Act that the European Commission proposed in 2022 and that now is under negotiations. When is it going to be adopted? No one knows, but it's there. The debate is already there on the table. This is an EU proposal that can be controversial in many ways. First, because it centralizes, you know, like a lot of control of media control to the European scale. Is it a good idea or not? Second, as well, because it goes to the detriment of this principle of subsidiarity that is key to the European Union and is largely forgotten and neglected. Third, as well, because it proposes the creation of a European watchdog. And fourth, this is also something that really, really drew my attention. They very much elaborate on the principle that I find controversial as well. This is the no intervention of the editor on the journalist. So they want basically editors, if I understand well, to put the money and watch, and not to have any further, you know, intervention. And basically, it's a rule that totally sacralizes the role of the journalists. Journalists are of crucial importance, of course, but editors too. So here, maybe on that question specifically, let me start maybe with the two editors in the room. Mr. Nehm, what do you think about this proposal? Does it go in the right direction? And especially as an editor, how do you feel about that? And then I will also give the floor to Jorge Soley.
Thank you very much. The EU Media Freedom Act proposal by the Commission, it's not Europe, it is the Commission. So it is very important, if we discuss here, that we make a clear separation about the institutions. Commission makes proposals, it's their job. They have passed this proposal to Parliament and Council. In the Council, there is the Hungarian government represented at the table, of course, and in Parliament, the members of European Parliament. The Parliament has not yet started to discuss it. It will soon these days. The Commission has not been appointed, to my knowledge, at least until today. The elements that the publishers' associations in Europe, from Helsinki to Lisbon, are unhappy with start with the request to member states, and we have a representative here, to not allow that sovereignty to regulate media goes from member states to the central administration in Brussels. All publishers have problems with the national governments. I'm sure Hungary is an exception. But we prefer to battle this nationally, not to put all eggs in one basket. It is important to separate the risks, to divert the risks, so that it's not all in one administration. Who knows what administration there will be in future in Brussels, at the Commission, what spirit. So the challenge is for the member states, Hungarian governments, 27 provinces in Europe have governments in the Council. Where are you? Will you be able to not allow that your job is being stolen to the central? First thing. Now, if this happens, if the member states are not able to stop this, and again, the Commission has a normal job to administer a country of 450 million people in 27 provinces. So it is always the question, where should the responsibility be? Remember in the vaccination issue, should it be national or not? So this is an ongoing discussion. Now, if this happens, if the member states are not able to stop this, then publishers have a number of things they would accept and some don't. Publishers tend to accept that advertising from state, government, ministries, etc., state companies, should be distributed by statistical, objective means. Media agencies know how to do this, and not by political means. Very important. There are a number of countries in Europe, unfortunately, where this happens. And this is misuse of tax money. If you do not put advertising money at a medium where you will meet the best people for your target group of whatever product. Second point, depolitization of public broadcasting or state media. Very important. Third point, no competition by public broadcasting to privates, etc., etc. So there are a number of things. And there are a number of things publishers absolutely don't like, and there's one point called Article 6.2, and that is to interfere in the very private relation between owner, publisher, and editorial leadership. This is private, state should not be in it. And I say this because publisher owners are free and have to be free to do all the mistakes they want to do. And I say this from my own company. Axel Springer, the founder, suffered, as he said, suffered like a dog with his own editors-in-chief. And that is the best relation. Publishers, owners will never be happy completely what the editors do. But you need these talents. And if you mingle too much with these talents, they will go away. Boris worked for Die Welt. You know the story. Welt was deficitarian for ages. Reason? Axel Springer mingled too much with his editors and they left. They went to the competition and made fantastic results over there. And the best readers went away. So publishers need the freedom to do their own mistakes. No state intervention, very strong point for publishers in Europe. So first, we hope that the governments will be able to stop this. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will give you now the floor, Jorge. Just a little parenthesis on housekeeping. In roughly 15 minutes, I will also give you the floor. Dear audience, you can ask your questions mostly through Slido. There is a number, 353-9-2-9-353-9129. And if it doesn't work, you just raise your hand and I will take the questions as well. Jorge, yes. I'm afraid you agree.
No, I agree with Florian. Indeed, it's the position that the Publishers Association in Spain made public. So I won't talk about what you have said perfectly. I would just add, well, first, that from our point of view in El Debate, we are, as you said, we are investing our money. We are trying to do our best. We are working hard, and of course, we want, and we as editors, we will interfere. Perhaps we make our own mistakes, but we'll do it, and probably, or for sure, we'll make mistakes. But I think that will be our mistakes made with our money, with our investments, with our efforts, and we have the right to make them without the control, the interference of government, of other institutions. And the other point I would like to stress is that all this body of media watchdog that it's that in the proposals you can see it. This European watchdog, we clearly think it's not necessary. We don't know under which authority it's based its work, and from our experience, we completely do not trust this kind of institutions because perhaps we have had a very negative experience in Spain, but we see that this kind of watchdogs are are very biased and very political control, and at the end, I remember something that in South America told me one friend, and it was about these banana republic dictators, and there was something that he said that it was to my friends everything, to my foes the law. So I think that this kind of bodies act like these banana republic dictators.
Jorge, you were not speaking about the rule of law regulations from the European Union, were you? But precisely now that you put that topic on the table, Mr. Koltay András, are you ready to wage this war in Brussels, in the Council of Ministers, and to block this proposal? Because I think Mr. Nehm has a fair point in the, sometimes we criticize a lot the European Union, but at the end, everything that has been adopted there has been adopted among other people, also by a crazy European Parliament that has, I don't know, we shouldn't speak about Al Jazeera today, no? It's a bit too much Qatar-based, no? But what about, the Council of Ministers? Sometimes they agree to proposals that basically seem, at first sight, unacceptable. Will you wage this war?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's up to the government to wage this war. But as far as I know, the Hungarian government is very critical of this proposal, and there are some other European governments who has shared the view of the Hungarian. So I don't think that the proposal will go through in its present format and with the same content. Obviously, as a media authority, we are very much involved in the process because we are members of several international organizations, the Communications Authorities Regulatory Board and the Media Authorities Regulatory Group, which the proposal aims to completely transform into a different body. So we will tell our opinions there in this level, but also we exchange our opinions with the Hungarian government. We have a very precise opinion on the proposal and also the issues you raised. First of all, media regulation is up to the member states, and it has never really formed part of the European regulation, apart from certain aspects which relates to trans or cross-border services that are relevant for the internal market. But the proposal aims to regulate several elements which were formerly purely up to the states to regulate: media concentration, independence of public service media, also the public advertising budget, and also the independent or individual decisions made by media regulatory bodies. We clearly see this as a breach of the EU treaty that regulates the powers of the relevant European bodies. Though the proposal and the arguments behind the proposal seems to be aiming at preserving the healthy functioning of the EU internal market, it relates to many issues which are not related to the internal market at all, but also to the national markets, and we see this as a breach of the subsidiarity principle and obviously the sovereignty of the states. The editorial independence rule is a very interesting proposal, so to say, which seems to forget the idea that press freedom also belongs to the owners of media outlets. So an owner of a media outlet, the proprietors, or obviously these are not single individual entities, they can all argue that press freedom belongs to them. Press freedom also belongs to the journalists and editors, of course, but it's up to them to make the decision and handle their own issues internally between the owners and the editors. So I absolutely agree with Florian in this regard. He did not mention the fact that the recommendation is already adopted, and the recommendation aims to establish some model safeguards in terms of journalistic and editorial independence, meaning independence from their own proprietors. And though the recommendation is a soft law instrument only, we never know whether these soft law instruments will turn to really strict legal rules in the future, and how, for example, the future European media regulatory body will oversee the execution of this recommendation. Also, this Media Services Board is very problematic. We have a similar body now, which is called the European Regulatory Group of Authorities, meaning media authorities. It works really well. It discusses their issues with the European Commission and with other European bodies. This would be transformed as a European Media Services Board with much wider scope, with much higher powers. For example, according to the proposal, this new body can issue opinions on any decision made by any European media authority, even if it is not related to the internal market at all. And all right, this is only an opinion,
or not.
It's not a decision. It's not something that can be taken to the court or whatever. On the other hand, it can also issue guidelines in any matter that forms part of the proposal or the future regulation. Guidelines are also soft law instruments. Mm-hmm. But if a European body issues a guideline, that is something that must be taken into regard. And if you see or if you just check the scope of the regulation, issuing opinions on individual decisions, issuing guidelines on important general issues with the scope together, which does not restrict itself to issues related to the internal market, that is very, very dangerous for national sovereignty and the sovereignty of the national regulatory bodies.
Thank you, András. You know, as a former practitioner in EU matters, you said two things that sound sajnos, unfortunately too familiar. The first one is the legal base. Sometimes they just grab power out of a legal base where there is none, and this is definitely the case of this proposal. If you look at the proposal, it's based on one article that is totally related to the common market, to the internal market. And it's actually the catch-all article. It's former article 95, 114 today. And basically this is, okay, whenever we don't have a clear mandate, we use this one for the internal market. So free movement of washing machines, for example, except that this one goes much further than that. So there's the first problem. And the second, and you described it very well, are the soft law measures, the guidelines, the recommendations. First, because from the top they become sometimes de facto law, and that's a problem. And second, because those recommendations also make their way to the EU budget. And at some point, and this is something you're also familiar with, they call it conditionality. We have to be very careful with that. Miklós, I'm going to give you the floor now, and down to Mr. Chirita. Mr. Szánthó, I will give you now, just ask me, I will ask you a question, a rhetorical question, because I know the answer. Is it the EU's business, basically? I want to read newspapers that have been controlled by the European board.
Of course it is. No, I'm just joking. Look, if the Media Freedom Act wasn't serious, I would handle this whole situation as very, very funny, really. Because visibly, double standards have become some kind of an official policy of the let's say, European Commission. It's very interesting to see that when a single European member state, let it be Poland, let it be Hungary, with a conservative government, tries to implement any kind of regulation on the media, then there is a scandal. Then automatically, of course, according to Brussels, media freedom ceases to exist. If there is any kind of amendment or a new media law proposed by a right-wing government, everyone in the mainstream speaks about an attack against rule of law, against democracy, against freedom of speech, etc. When the Hungarian new authority was established 11 years ago, 12 years ago, all of the bureaucrats from Brussels, and of course in the leading newspapers in Europe and in the US, etc., argued that this new authority will end any kind of free speech in Hungary, because any kind of authority controlling, supervising the media will lead to some kind of censorship. Now, what do we see? The Commission proposed a regulation on media. The Commission intends to establish a new authority controlling, supervising the media and communication. But seemingly, it's very democratic. It's very neutral, it's very objective, and it will be very independent.
Maybe because they don't have a legal base to do that.
Yeah, so yeah. That's my second one. I totally agree with Mr. Koltay that, and the story fits into what we always speak about in general. Because if there is a problem with the European Union, it's the tendency of this overwhelming action to outsource decision-making from the local level to the federal level, from the member states to Brussels. And that's why I always fear if I see any kind of proposed legislation from the Commission or from any EU body, to tell the truth, because I do have in mind that there will be some kind of a sneaking legislation. For example, soft laws. There will be some kind of a hidden intention that will try to outsource some kind of a competence which lays according to the treaties at the member states. But they're trying to outsource that competence to the Brussels level in order, yes, to create a United States of Europe. And just as a last sentence, let me quote the Honorable Jean-Claude Juncker, who was speaking 15, 20 years ago about the essence of decision-making in Brussels. He said, quote, "We decide on something, leave it lying around and wait and see what happens. If no one kicks up a fuss because most people do not understand what has been decided, we continue step by step until there is no turning back." That was official quote from Jean-Claude Juncker, that time leader of the Euro Commission or Eurogroup. So that is why we should pay attention, for example, to this Media Freedom Act, because seemingly the proposal is about technical issues, regulatory framework, tackling or combating misinformation, etc. But maybe this is the first time in my life when I say Mr. Juncker was right. This is about sneaking legislation and outsourcing competences from the member states to Brussels.
Watch out, it's almost hate speech what you did. Mr. Chirita, yeah, that's also one of my concerns. That at the end, once the Commission puts something on the table, it's never adopted like that, but at least half of it or two-thirds of it, out of compromise, an inertia of compromise is adopted. And that might also end up, in this case, with a very, very bad, very dangerous legislation that is finally toned down, diluted, but still adopted. Are you afraid of that? And also, a question for you, a more ideological question, but don't you think that we also run the risk that this Media Freedom Act, if adopted as it is going to carve in stone the current political, tendencies of the media? I think we can all agree that the majority of the media planet leans to the left more than to the right. Do you think that there is also a risk that those European legislations, if adopted, are going to crystallize, to make eternal, to make permanent the current, power between influence, so almost hegemony of the left on the right when it comes to the media planet?
So there is a point which has much relevance about what is underground the thinking of this draft regulatory project. It's about the European Board of Media Services, which will have a secretary lodged in the European Commission itself. This is very clear tendency, an attempt to influence the works of this European body. And this is why it should not be accepted. By the way, there is already a draft position, paper position, which was made by the European Association of Commercial Television in that respect, which develops a lot of remarks regarding what is unacceptable in that document. And I will refer to some other points which are very important. For instance, there is no provision that will limit the power of very large online platforms to take out from the platform what is audiovisual content already licensed and controlled by the local authorities of audiovisual legislation. And on the other hand, there are some other provision which should be enforced. I mean, it's about the rules of measuring audience, which should be openly and transparent stated in the whole European community. And also the the public funding, state public fundings will be another issue which should be regulated in this Media Act. And not at the least, there is a need to enforce independence of the sources and of the media outlets, which are not very clearly defined and guaranteed that will be without any interference from the authorities. I would remind that for now, the media law, which really exists, was referring solely to audiovisual media, I mean audiovisual content. One step in advance was made in 2010 when we had a directive about what is happening in on-demand services, and now there was another step forward for video sharing platforms. The Freedom Act, Media Freedom Act, also goes beyond those three steps to another one, because it's interfering with the activity of very large online platforms, no matter they are provider of audiovisual content or not. And step by step, as we see now, the European media legislation is covering more than the majority of the media activity in Europe. Not to mention that some of the outlets that are working in media are not based in Europe and do not obey European legislation. This is the case of very large platforms. There will be not an equilibrium between what is happening in Europe and in platforms and environments which are in competition with the European media institution. So I would recommend is available this paper position I mentioned of the visual of ACT, I mean Association of Commercial Television, which is now under. It will be proposed to the Parliament. There will be also some position coming from different countries. For instance, Germany already made its proposal, and there will be a serious debate in the Parliament, which will have to participate and sustain in order to have the best results in considering the final draft of this project.
No, thank you. Very important point on this extraterritorial application. Sometimes the EU has a tendency to adopt much stricter rules for its own people than for third countries. And I think on trade and on green policies, we already had enough examples of that. A question now from the floor, mostly for you, Mr. Koltay. What is the relation with, I mean, also market concentration is one of the issues. What is the situation of market concentration here in Hungary, especially regarding Kesma?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The regulation of ownership in the media market is regulated in the Media Act of Hungary, but it's a very, so to say, flexible regulation. So it does not deal with the printed press at all. It does not deal with online press. Only the Competition Act deals with these issues, and in the last decade there were one or two cases when two major publishing company wanted to merge, and the competition authority made its decision. So that's not up to the media authority to make decisions in this field. The broadcasting market is more strictly regulated in the Media Act, but in practice the regulation is not that strict because it wants to give the chance for individual outlets to get the audience share and thereby making sure that the necessarily finances and the advertising money will come to them. So the rule is that above 40% of audience share, if someone reaches 40% of the audience share, I mean one single entity, that they cannot get a newer license on the radio market or cannot merge with other broadcasters on the television market. That's basically the rule. Very few. I mean, at the moment, no one reaches this threshold. So basically, the rule is there, but in practice, there's no need to apply it. In terms of print and online media meaning online news portals with no broadcasting part. I mean, which are not present in the broadcasting market, are under the general competition rules in Hungary.
Thank you. And also a question for you, Mr. Soley. You spoke about Spain and you said that the medias in Spain are heavily subsidized. What do you think that, from El Debate point of view, which is not subsidized, do you think that's now the situation, how would you describe the situation of freedom of speech and freedom of press in Spain now under the current government? Do you feel the pressure or not? Do you think they are now preparing some liberticides or legislation? Are you afraid as a real independent, non-subsidized outlet or not?
I think that...
Sorry, and do you think that the EU is looking at Spain the way it looks at other countries?
Well, regarding the threats for independence, for freedom of expression, I think that we can see the clouds over there, but I think that we still can publish freely whatever we want. I think that sometimes it's not necessary to apply a law, but when you see the clouds coming, you start your self-censorship. And I think that this mechanism can perhaps is already working in Spain with some journalists, with some opinion makers that they prefer not to talk about some
self-censorship. No?
Yeah. So I think that nowadays the biggest threat is not the government taking us to the court or but our own self-censorship. I think that we try we try to well, at least I wake up in the morning and I say, okay, what I'm gonna say that it's clever, but it's also provocative, that can, I think that the audience will understand me. If I can say something that will offend someone, this is the goal of the purpose of the goal of each day. So to offend someone and to make those people that think they are offended to think, because I think that's how it works. Regarding.
Do you think the EU is looking at Spain with the same standards that it's looking at in other countries?
No. Well, I think that I was talking about with you that it's always the who, not what you say, but who says it. We are saying it inside Spain. I'm from Barcelona, in Catalonia. We can see that these double standards are working daily, and it depends on who says something. The sanctions or the treatment is completely different. It's quite clear.
Thank you. And the last question from the floor as well to you, Mr. Nehm. One of the panelists, concretely Mr. Szánthó Miklós, mentioned that the biggest threat to freedom of press today is political correctness. We see that it can definitely be, something that a phenomenon that we find in the big tech. The big techs are extremely politically correct. Some governments are as well. What about publishers? What about big publishers like Axel Springer? Are you also implementing this woke self-censorship? You're a vector of political correctness, or are you trying to stop it?
Thank you. I don't know what you're talking about. I believe it's rubbish. I can't answer. But I have a question to you.
Well,
In what way is the Spanish government subsidizing the press? Could you be more specific on that, please? Thank you.
Jorge, just one thing. Mr. Nehm, I think everyone understands what political correctness means, and maybe we all expect a more elaborated answer after Mr. Soley answers to yours.
I don't. Give me a lecture what you mean. Define it precisely. I can't answer to that. Thank you.
Okay, I will define it after Jorge.
It's the Spanish government, but it's also each regional government. They have big budgets for helping the press, depending on some very, very loose criteria, and also through advertising. And we can see that there are I saw an investigation from the university in Barcelona, precisely comparing in Catalonia all the subsidies given by the regional government to the different media, and comparing it with the range of people they arrive, the number of newspapers they sell, and it's completely biased, but a huge margin, completely biased to the press that supports the regional government. So they direct the subsidies to their friends. And I have to say, the problem is not just this, but that I think that many parties, many political parties agree with this system, because they think that when they arrive to power, they will use in their favor. So they don't want to change the system, but to control it. And this is, for me, it's terrible.
Barcelona is not Spain. Catalonia is not Spain,
well, it's
so it's just important not to generalize.
Well, no, I think that the same happens in Valencia, the same has happened, yes, in other parts of Spain.
Please don't say in Spain or Spanish subsidies, because this is illegal, and if it would be that tax money goes there, it would be transparent, and it's not the case. So this is why I ask, be more specific, because I'm not aware, and if you are aware, please share it.
I think this is This is something that the Spanish government is doing it.
You said regions, not...
No, the Spanish too. The Spanish government is doing this. The region, in Catalonia, they are doing this. They are doing this in Valencia. They are doing this in many other regions.
And Spain is the exception in Europe. This is why the Media Freedom Act goes exactly, one of the things is this, but we will have opportunity to listen more carefully what precisely you mean, because I cannot confirm, from my knowledge of Spanish regulation and media, what you're saying. Thank you.
And speaking about precision, woke ideology is the fact, for example, that the New York Times is calling women menstruators. It's the fact that countless numbers of journalists have been cancelled, sometimes by their publishers as well. It also means that, some stories are silenced. I'm referring to all those things, Mr. Nehm. And my question again, and the question from the floor, was whether, this is something that you feel in your group, this is something that you are stopping, or something that you are promoting. I hope I was concrete enough.
No, I'm not, sorry, I'm not, see, if you have concrete examples, the debate on debate on what is discussed or topics, etc. In the group of Axel Springer, if you go to the website, you will see that there's a large number of publications, and they all have different editorial teams, and they are not synchronized, thanks God, not synchronized. That is the secret of this business, that you have individuals with own profiles. And no, I'm not aware.
Thank you. I think that was a much less derogatory answer. Since we don't have any more answers from the floor, let me thank everyone, all the panelists, the audience. Thanks for coming, and viva la libertad.